Hello everyone, it's Theme Park Avenue, I'm Eric. In this video, I am ranking every wooden roller coaster in Six Flags parks. Before we begin, I have a caveat. I have not actually been on all of them. There are two that will not be listed. Those are American Thunder at St. Louis and Roar at Six Flags America. They were closed when I went, so I cannot rank those. But there are 16 I'm going to rank. It's based on personal enjoyment, and that will be very clear right from the get-go. Let's begin. Number 16 is Screamin' Eagle at Six Flags St. Louis. An unpopular take. I hear many love this ride. Some of the operators I talked to said it was their favorite in the park. For me, this was actually really tough to get through. The first drop and the two airtime hills that follow are nice. The terrain is excellent, of course. I like being in the forest. Unfortunately, this one actually was kind of terrifying because of the bumpiness. It was janky in pretty much every part of my body, and I would say my throat and my chest was kind of tightening up during it. I can remember the fear that I felt to the point where I genuinely thought the ride was capable of being a new euthanasia coaster. And by new, I guess I mean old, because it's been around for a while, but it seemed like it had that capability. I know that's an exaggeration to an extent, but I definitely was kind of gasping for breath at the very end of the ride. So it's definitely one I found painful. People tell me I must have gotten the wrong row or the wrong train, and maybe that's true, but I got multiple rides, and I thought they were different trains, and as it stands right now, I definitely don't really want to ride Screamin' Eagle ever again. Number 15 is Little Dipper at Six Flags Great America, a contender for number 1, but I guess I had to be a little more serious for this. It is a kiddie wooden coaster, more or less. It's very small, it has its decent pops of airtime, and I'm really happy I got to ride it, but because it's a bit more mild in thrills, and that's something I do look for in a wooden coaster, I would say it's among the weakest. Number 14 is Judge Roy's Scream at Six Flags Over Texas. Admittedly, it's been a while since I rode this one. I remember it being a better version of Screamin' Eagle. It was definitely smoother, but it definitely didn't have as much to enjoy either. I kind of like the setting of the ride, and it's very large in the way a classic wooden coaster often is. It's a nice out and back one in a lot of ways, but it's also not really a super enjoyable one either. And I'm really going to analyze that whole smoothness factor in a little bit. Number 13 is Wildcat at Frontier City. This one is a family wooden coaster, certainly bigger than Little Dipper, but still does not have the best stats. One thing I will shout out is the queue is really fun. You have a bunch of signs about other better wooden coasters. Sorry to say it like that, but it's true. And it's kind of fun to look at that, see which one you've been on and all. And then the ride itself does not really give a lot of airtime. It does give some bumpiness, and the parts that do kind of lift you out of your seat are bumpy, so rough airtime is a new experience. It's not painful, it's not thrilling, it's among the most run-of-the-mill roller coasters I can imagine. A lot of stuff isn't that forceless or boring for me. This comes kind of close to that metric. So it is worth riding once, but not really a must in really any stretch. Number 12 is Thunderbolt at Six Flags New England. This one is fine. It is an improvement over Wildcat because it is more thrilling. There is some decent airtime, and I thought it was rough, but not painful. Let's go into that. So there is definitely a difference between a rough wooden coaster and a painful one. A wooden roller coaster is often rough. That's just how they are. They're built out of wood. It's not going to be as perfectly glossy the way a B&M roller coaster that's made out of steel would be, and that's fine. I can tolerate a good degree of roughness. However, there are rides that are painful with how much they shake you around, to the point that it takes away from the ride experience, and you might not really enjoy being on the roller coaster. Thunderbolt definitely does not really fall into that trap. Everyone in my family would disagree, but I thought it was enjoyable enough. The big issue for me is that half of the ride is really slow and uneventful, so it's just kind of unspectacular in the way Wildcat is, but the first half makes up for it. Number 11 is Le Monstre at La Ronde. One many have come to agree is not that rough compared to what it used to be considered. I thought it was very fun. It is rough at points, some parts are really shaky, but it's only like one moment, and it's the only one that's kind of painful. The bigger issue with the ride, I will admit, is that it's kind of slow in the way Thunderbolt is, but that doesn't mean there aren't a few really great drops, and I enjoyed being on the ride. It doesn't race anymore, which is a bit of a bummer. There are a lot of things holding it back, but I still enjoyed it. I'm glad I went on. I might even do it again if I went back. And I honestly think because of how grand a figure it is, if they were to RMC it, I would want it to look very similar. It's a beautiful roller coaster to look at in front of the water. And overall, it's better than most say. Number 10 is the Boss. The Boss is a weird anomaly of a roller coaster. Very divisive too. Some think it is terrible. Some think it's one of the greatest things out there. I'm in the middle. This ride is intense. It has the speed, it has the length, it has a handful of airtime moments. It could be one of the best wooden roller coasters in the world. However, it is a painful experience to get through. Not as bad as Screaming Eagle, mind you, but the way the ride works, at least for me, is that you will get slammed into the side of the car several times. I was not expecting this, and definitely wasn't enjoying that. And it definitely took away in the way the roughness does from Screaming Eagle. I enjoyed the ride overall. I still think it's probably a good roller coaster because more than the other rides I've mentioned, I can look past the flaws and acknowledge that there's some excellent elements on it. And it could be a top tier ride, but unfortunately, because you get slammed into the side, it's not even the rattle. It's just getting slammed into the side. I don't think it's really a great ride, and I might not even want to rewrite it unless I was pretty certain it would be a superior experience. Number 9 is Great American Scream Machine. Yes, disregard the times I said this was like the worst roller coaster ever. It is better now. After a good 5 years of waiting, I went back on and enjoyed the ride. It used to be extremely painful. Now it still has the rattle, but the rattle does not hurt. So it is in a similar lane to something like Thunderbolt. It's not a painful or unenjoyable ride. It has a handful of decent airtime moments, and I think it's a nice ride to look at as well because it's huge. It takes up a large footprint, I enjoy it, and I think the biggest issue with this one is not roughness, it's the fact that the ride doesn't have the great forces, and honestly to an extent, it doesn't have that classic feel as much as some other wooden coasters on the list. It still has the rattle that is nice for making it feel like a classic ride, but by the end, it did feel like it could have been built today, but by a more family-oriented company. It's a good ride, but it's not really among the best at Over Georgia, and at least the roughness can be looked past now. Number 8 is Wild One at Six Flags America. This one is rougher than Great American Scream Machine, but it also has some excellent airtime moments and an insane final helix. I think it's pretty fantastic if not for the fact that some parts are pretty painful. It is over 100 years old, so I will say being rough in this way is far more excusable and feels far more like a classic ride than everything else on the list. That helped the spot a little bit. Ultimately, it's not really one of my favorite wooden coasters. I don't look back and think, oh yeah, that's one of the best I got on this year. But I enjoyed it, and I'll leave it at that. Number 7 is Viper at Six Flags Great America. One many would say is among the best rides in that park, and while I enjoy it a lot, I would not quite go that far. You may have noticed this is the first of the major Great America wooden coasters I mentioned, and the one thing I enjoy about the ride more than anything else, honestly, it is long. This ride feels incredibly lengthy. I swear I thought it felt like it was a 2.5 minute prime ride experience. And I'm honestly shocked if it's not. It has a handful of strong airtime moments and holds its speed quite well through the ride. I think the others have better moments above it, but I enjoy the ride a lot. And definitely would consider it one of the best wooden coasters in the chain, but there's not that much else to say about it because I don't appreciate as much of it as a lot of other people do. So I would check out someone else's video if you want to know more about Viper. Number 6 is Predator at Darien Lake. This one now has some Titan track and is adding more. what I did enjoy from the Titan track was perfectly smooth, but jarring. Because the ride has a pretty crazy rattle beforehand, but not a painful one somehow. So it is a good classic feeling wooden coaster. Going from the wooden track to the Titan track and back is really jarring. And there's no other way to put it. It's just you go from perfect smooth experience to suddenly you hear the rattle again, you're shaking again. But the ride has a great sense of speed, and you will get thrown out of your seat quite a few times. It's a long experience, not Viper long, but still long, and one of my favorite rides at Darien Lake, and definitely a great wooden coaster. Number 5 is Comet at the Great Escape. Great Escape is not my favorite park, but Comet is definitely a standout here. Everything about it is fantastic. An old, classic, well-restored wooden coaster that's kept really nicely, still has the rattle, but is not painful, and the airtime moments are far superior to anything mentioned so far. I loved them. You will get thrown many times, and it's a long experience, has a simple but effective layout, and there isn't any complaints I can really throw at it. I enjoyed the ride, one of my favorite wooden coasters, and definitely one of the best in Six Flags. Number 4 is American Eagle at Six Flags Great America. One that a lot of people seem to dislike, and the red train is apparently much better, and I got blue this year. It's still awesome. I will say this is one of the fastest wooden coasters in the world, and you can feel that. This ride has phenomenal speed for the first and last portions. The airtime is the best of any wooden coaster on this list with the exception of 1, maybe 2. And the only flaw with the ride is the helix. It is long, it is drawn out, it gives the most janky moments, but I still love this massive creation. It's beautiful to look at, and when you're on the ride, you can enjoy that too. The final parts continue the sense of speed I mentioned earlier, and the airtime hills actually work insanely well at the end too. The only thing that I will say about the racing is that even though it's not dueling anymore, when the operations are done right, you can be passing the next train going up as you're getting to the station, and that's fun. And American Eagle is an excellent wooden coaster. Number 3 is Apocalypse, the ride at Six Flags Magic Mountain. This one, everything is great. It has the rattle, but not painful. It has GCI pacing, and you know GCI pacing is great. I mean, Mystic Timbers is my favorite wooden coaster pretty much. So I love that. There are a handful of airtime moments, and they aren't long and drawn out enough that they take away from the intensity. So everything that wants to be done by this ride is. It's running better than ever now, and it's among the best roller coasters at Six Flags Magic Mountain. I thoroughly enjoyed my experience on it, and highly recommend making it a priority at that park. Number 2 is Goliath at Six Flags Great America. One of the best Goliaths. I enjoy this one for its individual elements. The first drop, the airtime hill, the dive loop, and especially the stall. This ride has so much going for it. The flaws are the troughs of each hill do have a rattle that's unfortunately a bit more painful in some rows. And also, the ride is short. I've talked about long rides on these other ones, and this one, if not for the phenomenal elements, could rank a bit lower. But what it does have is outstanding, even though it does leave you wanting a little more. It's been mentioned before, and overall this one is a bit of a lower tier RMC, but I enjoy it, definitely recommend it. That said, number 1 has to be El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. I won't talk too much about this one because, I've said before, while it is the best wooden coaster at Six Flags, it is overrated. I think the first parts are elite. The first drop, the camelbacks, wonderful. They are some of the best airtime you'll ever experience. Beyond that, the ride has good speed, and there are other airtime moments throughout, and it's a fairly long and grand experience, but it does jackhammer more than the majority of rides on this list, especially near the back, and it's kind of hard to enjoy in those rows. That said, it's not as bad as something like Boss or Screaming Eagle, and the best parts are so good that I have to overlook the flaws for this. Far more than Boss. And because the best parts really are the best, and maybe to an extent, because I just think El Toro is more enjoyable than the others on this list as a whole, it had to be the #1 wooden coaster in a Six Flags park. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this list. I'm sure some of you did not because of my El Toro comments and similar, but subscribe for more content. There's a lot more on the way. I'll see you next time.